I had another owner contact me and say, hey, my HOA is having a vote on putting restrictions on short-term rentals. What should I do? How should I vote? And because of my involvement at Florida Realtors and advocacy, I was able to say, listen, this sounds good. I know as an owner it sounds good, but if they can take away the rights to an owner and their private property rights, saying you cannot do a short-term rental, what's next? Because what's next is we don't want any rentals in there at all.
You're listening to the Real Estate Sessions, and I'm your host, Bill Risser. With nearly 25 years in the real estate business, I love to interview industry leaders, up-and-comers, and really anyone with a story to tell. It's the stories that led my guests to a career in the real estate world that drives me into my 9th year and nearly 400 episodes of the podcast. And now, I hope you enjoy the next journey. Hi, everybody. Welcome to episode 397 of the Real Estate Sessions podcast. As always, thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you so much for telling a friend. Today, I busted out the mobile podcast package, which really is not much. It's a Zoom 6 digital recorder, a couple of wired lavalier mics, and I decided to bring it along to the Florida Realtors Convention. I was there for the RE Bar Camp. I think it's my 7th year participating as a facilitator and a volunteer. But I knew Tiea Vincent, right? The broker owner of Next Level Real Estate and Property Management was going to be there. I met Tiea at a bar camp in Jacksonville. She's an amazing woman doing some crazy good stuff in the world of real estate, mostly on the property management side, but getting into the sales stuff as well. So let's get this thing started. Tiea, welcome to the podcast.
Hello.
It's going to be a lot of fun, right? So we've known each other for how long, would you guess? 5 years?
5 years.
5 years or so. It started with bar camp up in the Jacksonville area. Mm-hmm. It's rolled over to the Florida Realtors event. You're down here a lot because you're very active.
I am.
At the association level, and we'll talk about that. But the first thing I always do in the podcast is I love to find out where people are from. And you let it slip on this trip here. I found out that you're from a very rural part of Tennessee. So let's, first of all, give me the town, how many people, and what was it like growing up there?
So town, it's called Ashland City. It's about 30 miles west of Nashville, between Clarksville and Nashville. So I tell people I'm from Nashville because nobody knows where Ashland City is. The county sheriff is my cousin. I'm related to basically everyone. I could not date anyone from my high school because we all have the last name is the same. Very small. I don't know the population. Back then maybe 2,000 or 3,000. It's a little bit bigger now because Nashville's spreading and they got to grow somewhere. But
is it almost a bedroom community getting that way of Nashville, where people are?
Not really,
quite.
But there's a couple of Airbnbs starting to pop up, and they did put a condominium on the river where a couple of country music singers have purchased. So we got a Walmart. We were very surprised when we got our first super Walmart, so that was exciting. But there's still only like 2 red lights in the whole town.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I love it.
You lived there your entire childhood, mm-hmm. and you went to school there, high school.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Tell me what it's like.
My grandmother was the lunch lady. She used to ask me, she used to say, well, sweetie, what do you want on the salad bar? And I always wanted sweet gherkin pickles on the salad bar. And so my grandma was the lunch lady.
Wow. I mean, I just can't even imagine. I mean, I grew up in San Diego.
Mm-hmm.
And
a little different.
So what I would imagine if you were, misbehaving as an 8 or 9 or 10-year-old in another part of the town, that your mom was going to find out about it pretty quick.
I turned the wrong direction one time on a road, and before I could turn around and go back, my dad called me. Somebody had seen me because I had a very noticeable truck. I wanted the big jacked up with the tires and the lift and all of that. I wanted to be the biggest truck in the school parking lot because I was a girl and I wanted to set an example for the boys. And so I always turned left to go to school, and that day I wasn't going to school, but muscle memory, I wound up turning left. And I was like, oh, my bad, let me go down to the church and turn around. Before I could turn around, my father was calling me, where are you going? And this was before GPS. He wasn't tracking me. Someone had seen me and was like, oh, I just saw your daughter on the road. You get away with nothing.
Nothing, right? Yeah. But tell me the good parts about it. There has to be these great parts about being in a small town.
Oh yeah, like I know everyone. It's amazing. I go back. It's so down to earth. It's not the hustle and bustle. I'm telling you, when I drive home, I cross the Tennessee state line in Chattanooga, and it is like the world falls off my shoulders. And I just can breathe easy. The air seems cleaner. It's beautiful.
Are you a Rocky Top fan? I mean, is that something that's a big part of your life? Because I know SEC's massive here.
Yeah.
You know Sean Carpenter, and he's a Gator guy, and he doesn't like Tennessee at all.
So my sister, diehard Rocky Top fan, like all the girls wear the little cheerleading outfits and things like that. I will say, when I was younger, I dated a gator. And it was a very pleasant relationship. He was very nice, a gentleman. When we did broke up, it was for mutual reasons, and he was very polite. And since then, I was like, you know what, those Gator boys, they're okay. And so if I had to be a fan, it would be of the Gators, and my sister would shoot me if she heard it.
You can't say that in the state of Tennessee, right?
I know you can't say it in Tennessee.
It's so funny. Why I keep thinking Georgia's so much closer to Gainesville.
But they do not like the Gators.
It's a big thing with Tennessee, and I don't know what it maybe.
My sister's very clear about it when we talk about it.
Very clear. All right, I love that. So what was 16-year-old Tiea thinking about for a career? Now, I know you're in a small town. My guess is you wanted to leave.
I wanted to leave.
Okay, for sure.
I was one of the very few. I think out of my graduating class, only 2 of us got out. 2 of us left.
Wow.
In that small town, you get married, you have babies, and you stay there.
Wow.
My sister just moved out to Clarksville, which is only an hour away. That's as far as she's got.
Is it bigger?
It's bigger.
Okay.
Clarksville's got an Air Force base. It's a much larger city.
Okay.
My brother, so my parents live on the end of a dead-end road, 1 mile. I know it's 1 mile because we had to argue with the county to get a school bus to come down. So we had to extend our driveway with gravel to make it exactly 1 mile so we could get a school bus. And next door to my father and mother is my Aunt Wanda, and next to her is my Aunt Susie, and now next to her is my brother has built a home. And now my cousin is also trying to build a home. So my grandfather back in the day bought up all this land, and every time one of his family members would get married, he would give them 2 acres to build a house. And it was just side by side by side by side. So now the county has a rule that you have to have a minimum of 5 acres to build, so it's a little different. But all the families still right there next to each other. Yeah.
So what was that thing in your mind? Like, I'm leaving and I want to do this.
Criminal justice. I wanted to be a detective. I wanted to be a police officer, a potential lawyer at some point, but something in the law field. I actually had a full ride scholarship to UTC Chattanooga for a criminal justice degree, and I gave it up to get married, to move away.
Sometimes that happens,
Sometimes
right?
it happens.
Yeah, so you ended up marrying somebody in the military.
I married a guy that went to not my high school, but another high school nearby, and he joined the military. So I tell people, you know the song, like, where were you when 9/11 happened? I remember. I mean, I have chill bumps right now. I remember exactly where I was, 11th grade, homeroom class. They said, turn on the TV. My boyfriend at the time was texting. We had Nextels and little two-way talkies. And he said, they just told us to turn on the TV at his high school.
Wow.
And at that moment, he said, I'm joining the Navy.
Wow.
He watched what was happening, and he said, I need to serve. And he said, I'm joining the Navy. And in that moment, I knew that I had to choose college or to follow him. And I followed him.
Yeah.
I followed a boy. That's what we do as girls sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes, right?
Yeah.
Tell me, so he's got to go off to boot camp. He's got to do his thing. I'm sure it was on the East Coast. They didn't throw him out in San Diego, probably.
No, he was in Chicago for boot camp.
Oh, Chicago. Okay, so.
Graduated Valentine's Day, and I went for the graduation. I don't know if you've been to Chicago in February.
It's cold.
That's the coldest of cold of cold.
It's windy.
Never want to do that anymore.
Yeah, don't do that anymore. So were you working at this time then? Because you knew you weren't going to go on to college. You knew it was time to get a job. What were you doing at this time?
So I started working at a very young age.
Okay.
I got my driver's license at 14.
Is that legal in Tennessee?
It's called a hardship license.
Okay.
So it only allowed me to go to and from school, to and from work if I had a job, and I could transport my brothers and sisters to and from their activities
in a big
as well.
lifted jacked up truck.
I had a Dodge Spirit at that time. The jacked up truck didn't come until I was 17, and I helped pay for it. But
all right, good.
But so I was driving since I was 14. I was working since I was 14.
Okay.
My first job was at a drag strip, race cars. So I still can smell the smell of rubber burning, and I love it, and the gasoline.
Yeah.
But that was my first job. And then during summers through high school, I worked at a company called Pay Systems. They did payroll like ADP.
Sure.
ADP was their big competitor. I did accounts receivables, accounts payables for them.
Okay.
So I got some accounting background. And then I moved away when I turned 18 and got married. We got our first apartment, and I said, hey man, I'm new to the area. Do you know anybody hiring? And they said, we are. And that was how I got into real estate by accident. They said, if you live on property, we'll give you a discount. And 18-year-old Tiea thought rent discount sounds amazing. So
that's great.
And here I am, 21 years later, still in real estate.
So you started off in property management, I guess, from the get-go, because that's what you're doing in an apartment complex.
When
right?
I fill out applications nowadays, they ask, like, what was your career before real estate? And I'm like, high school. High school was my career, because I really didn't have one.
Yeah, that's awesome. So tell me, did you have to do any travel? Did you have to move around quite a bit Because I don't know how his station was or what his deployments were.
We got really lucky. So my husband now, what he did in the Navy was very specific.
Okay.
The plane he flew on was a very specific plane. There's only so many of them in the world that have the equipment. And so there's only so many bases that have a plane like that. So we had very limited options of where we could go. So of the 20 years he did in the military, 17 were in Jacksonville. With a 3-year hiatus to Hawaii, of all places, which is where my daughter was born.
Okay.
But yeah, so we mostly stayed in Florida.
Okay. And that was your, first, you've been to Florida before, I would imagine? Maybe not.
Listen, Florida is where Tennessee, country people go for vacation, and we save up for years to do so. And I remember as a child, we had saved money in this big cauldron, a metal cauldron, like a witch's cauldron kind of thing. I don't know.
God.
I have no idea where it came from as a child, but we had it, and we had all this change in it from my dad's pocket to save up to go to Disney. And someone broke in our home, stole a bunch of things, and burned our house down.
Oh, no.
It was horrible. And when I remember being there, holding my mom's hand, she swore I wasn't there, but I can remember seeing her belly. She was pregnant with my sister at the time when it happened. And I remember the firefighters pulling the cauldron out. All the money had melted into one big brick of metal.
Oh, no.
And so I didn't get to go to Disney until I was probably 17.
Okay.
Because we saved up money to get there.
And that was the big deal.
And that was the big deal. So Florida was where we came for vacation. So by the time I moved here, yes, I'd been here before, but a totally different experience when you're going to the mouse house at Disney versus living in Jacksonville.
Yeah, okay.
A little different.
I totally get that. So when you're in Jacksonville, you're in this apartment complex, there you go. How did it continue for you? Because you obviously picked up some skills as a leasing agent. Is that?
I was a leasing agent. Within a couple of months, I remember Trisha. Her name was Trisha, and she was the property manager. Beautiful woman, and I remember she had Tiffany jewelry, and it was I just looked at her like, here's 18-year-old Tiea going, teach me your ways, right?
Yeah.
And I remember her going into her office one day, shutting the door, and she was raising hell with somebody.
Ooh.
But she was just so affirmative and strong in the way she presented herself, and I was like, I don't know what I need to do to become that, but I want to be like her. She's so secure in herself. And so I went and said, how do I get her job? And they said, well, you have to get a license. You have to be a real estate agent in order to be a property manager. So within 6 months, I got my real estate license, and then they had another community open up over off of University in Bowdoin, and they said, we need a property manager, come on over. And so I took over a 400-unit apartment community at like 18 years old.
Wow. So yeah, that's cool.
And I tell people I'll never go back to multifamily. And it's mostly because I don't like being stuck in an office where I don't get to see the world, and the same tenants are coming in and complaining right to your face, and you can't escape it. But I did get one really amazing skill from it, and that is sales. I can sell like no other, because when a person comes into an apartment community and they don't like the floor plan, it's not like you got 10 other houses to show them. You got to show them the only thing you got is the same floor plan. So you learned how to sell the community and the environment and the floor plan and the pot. So I learned how to sell from apartments.
Yeah.
And then when we moved to Hawaii, I got my license in Hawaii, and I was looking for an apartment community to manage. That's what I thought I was going to do.
Sure.
There are no apartments in Hawaii.
Yeah, I imagine in certain
There's
parts
no land.
especially. Yeah.
There's no land to build these massive complexes. So there's duplexes, quads, things like that, but they're all condominiums where each one's owned by a different person.
Right.
So I was forced into single family management in Hawaii, and I never looked back.
Okay, so that was a radical change, right, for you. Talk about just how tough. I mean, you touched on it there, but I always think it has got to be very tough in property management. You have to be tough. And you've already kind of identified yourself here on this episode.
Yeah.
You're very tough.
Yes.
So we'll talk about that part of the story, and I imagine you probably have numerous examples.
I've got 21 years of examples of toughness, but I've mentored several property managers over the years, newbies into the business, and my number one thing is there's no crying in property management. And you have to be really tough. They're going to call you names. They're going to lie. It's going to happen. I will tell you, in 21 years, there has been one scenario where I actually cried. And it was when I was in Hawaii. We had a tenant who'd been in a property for like 7 years. I didn't manage it for the full 7 years, but they'd been there that long. And they started getting behind on their rent. And I went over to deliver the notice of eviction if they don't pay, like pay up or get out, right? And the woman answered the door, and her kids were there, And I gave her the notice, and it turned out that she had to quit her job because she had cancer. So the husband had taken a second job, and he was trying to, but the drugs that they were giving her for the cancer were making her very volatile. And so when she answered the door and the kids were there was a noise in the background, and it was like the smoke alarm going off. And the kid's like, Mom, the food's burning. And I was like, do you need to go get that? Oh. And she's like, no, that's okay. You can starve my kids too. And the kids are like, who is this? I remember, and I had my baby. I just picked my daughter up from childcare. She was maybe 6 months old in the car. I was doing this on my way home. And when the kid came to the door and said, who is this? The mom goes, this is the woman that's going to take our house from us. Oh. And I handled it in that moment just fine. But when I got in the car, I cried all the way home. And that was the last time I cried in property management.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, that's
it's a story.
That one is understandable. Yeah. Completely. Yeah.
But you work for the owner. You don't work for the tenant. Absolutely. And that owner has bills to pay.
Yep.
You know, for a couple years there, they called me the Grinch because I evicted my neighbor like 3 days before Christmas. But she's like, I have to buy Christmas gifts. Well, so did the owner, and he has 2 mortgages to pay now.
Correct. Wow.
You know, it's not that I don't feel bad. There's that sympathy versus empathy.
Yeah.
I can feel bad, but it can't change my direction of what I have to do, you know, to my fiduciary responsibility.
Yeah, it is just part and parcel of what it means to be a property manager. Is that's, you know, no matter how big, you can have an operation that has 2,000 doors and 6 property managers or 8 or however many it takes, they're all going to have that experience. It's
at
just
some point in time in the career, it's going to happen.
So it would seem to me that those relationships you have with owners can lead to, you know, the other side of the business, which is buying and selling, right? You must have had some owners who said, hey, things are going great for me. I'd love to look at a couple of other options. So do you handle those kind of deals where you're kind of having your own lead generation for buyers and sellers?
So we kind of hinted off record earlier about my previous business partners and previous brokerages, but that was one of the things that we didn't see eye to eye. They did not want me to do any sales. Okay. And I have these relationships with these owners, and a lot of times if the owner's selling, they want the property manager to list it because we have got a relationship with the tenant, so showings are a lot easier, like trying to get them to cooperate with showings. Yeah. But a lot of times the owners are wanting to buy more investment properties. There was a couple years ago when my partners decided they didn't want me to do sales. I sold 5 houses, but all 5 of them sold to the tenant living in them. So I wound up with both sides of the deal. Most of my deals are what they call birthday sales, where you have both sides of them.
Okay.
And they call them birthday sales because they typically only come around once a year. But for me, most of my sales are birthday sales because the tenant is buying the property they're living in.
I mean, do you help set up rent to owns and on that kind of? I think
I'm
there's
not
some
a fan
of that
of
going
rent
on.
to owns.
Okay, why is that?
A lot of the contracts are written in a way to purposely almost screw over the tenant.
Make it really, really hard.
Make it really, really hard. Yeah.
But you give up a lot of money trying to get there.
Okay. And if you go into some of these investor groups, they're doing a lot of rent to owns, and they're doing it, and they're giving the loan, the mortgage, to tenants they know are not going to be able to close in 5 years. They know it. And then they'll take all their money for the next 2 to 3 years as they're doing rent to own, and when it comes time to make the payment, that big payment, they can't do it, and they foreclose on the mortgage note, and you're out, and then they go find another person that wants to rent to own. So I'm not a huge fan.
Not a huge fan.
Yeah.
No, okay.
If the contract was written properly, maybe I could discuss it, but I'm not a huge fan.
Give me the typical day for you. I know for a residential resale realtor, right, who's out there doing buying and selling full time, not doing any property management whatsoever, I'm pretty comfortable with their day if they're really good at what they do. Some prospecting in the morning, putting out some fires, going through emails, and then it's, you know, lead generation and follow up, and then they have a lot of appointments. Yeah. What's a typical day for a property manager, you know, an owner broker of your company?
So I time block my broker portion of it, so I know when I'm supposed to do my bank reconciliation. So there's 2 days of a month that it's just for accounting. It's just accounting. But on the day-to-day property management, I just did a content video that I haven't released yet on this because I think people think we're rent collectors. Like, oh, we just collect rent, maybe write a maintenance order. But for example, last week, I pulled permits to put a fence in on a property. I had a plumber go by and stake out the septic tank on a property because the insurance said that we need to trim the tree that's hanging over the roof, and I can't put the crane on the property until I know where the septic lines are. I had another owner contact me and say, hey, my HOA is having a vote on putting restrictions on short-term rentals. What should I do? How should I vote? And because of my involvement at Florida Realtors and advocacy, I was able to say, listen, this sounds good. I know as an owner it sounds good, but if they can take away the rights to an owner and their private property rights, saying you cannot do a short-term rental, what's next?
Yep.
Because what's next is we don't want any rentals in there at all.
Yeah.
And as an owner, you may not like the short-term rentals or the rentals at all, but it's your right as a property owner to do what you want with your property within reason. Don't have a drug house, right? Things like that.
Yeah.
But these are the things that property managers are doing. You know, this morning I had a tenant say, "Oh, I have no water." Well, why didn't we have any water? There was nothing wrong. The bills paid,
Yeah.
you know. Well, the water is paid by the owner, the whole building. Well, it turned out unit 4 that's vacant popped a leak. And JEA, the water company, noticed the leak was a gallon of water in a minute. They came over and just turned the water off.
For everybody.
For everyone. So
Oh,
all 3
geez.
tenants came home with no water, and here I am going, let's get a plumber out there to find a leak in a vacant room
Yeah.
and get the water turned back on.
That's brutal.
We just firefight.
Wow.
We just firefight.
So let's talk about your company. So you're the broker owner of Next Level Real Estate.
Next Level Real Estate.
NXT.
NXT.
Why?
Because somebody had NEXT. Ironically, though, I love this portion. I named it NXT. I wanted something a little edgy, a little fun. The next level came from leaving a business relationship with some business partners where I knew that I could get us to the next level, and I was being held back and being told no. And so when I went out on my own, I was like, oh, my email is Levels Up, Tiea Levels Up.
Yeah,
And
I saw that.
it fed into Next Level Real Estate. But I went with NXT because of branding reasons and trademark violations and things like that with another company. And then right after I released it, NAR rebranded their conference as NXT.
Oh, that's right.
So now, I mean, literally within 2 months of me announcing, they rebranded. So now every time I go to a conference, I'm taking pictures with all the NXT photos. I'm like, this is free, like props. Like when you're done with this, just
You
give
got
it to me.
lots of content.
Yes.
That's very cool. What are the plans? So is it, you don't have a big staff, right?
Nope,
It's just
nope.
you.
I'm still
currently.
growing it, yeah.
So let's do that, sort of a boring question. So 5 years from now, what do you see Next Level being?
Yeah, so I'd like to grow it, the portfolio under the management, bring on some more commercial. I did commercial with my last brokerage, so I have the experience, but like to bring on some commercial and do more sales. I'm really enjoying the sales I'm doing. Yeah, right now I've got an investor that's selling a bunch of pad split homes, so I got the option to like go into a new niche market and learn something new, which was fun. But I want to have a good work-life balance. I didn't have that before. I grew that company. We had over 250 doors. They had 125 agents. I didn't have time to go boating with my daughter or take her to get fabric shopping because she sews all her own clothes. Like I didn't have time for that. So I'm really enjoying the work-life balance.
Which is really hard to do in real estate.
It's very hard. I will
Very.
tell you, I have a 13-year exit plan. So my plan is to retire in 13 years, which is very young. I'm only 39 at this point, so 13 years is very young to retire. But my husband did 20 years in the Navy, so he has a pension from there. He's currently in the elevator union, and so he will be able to retire with a second pension in 13 years. So my goal is to build the company large enough that I can either hire a broker and just collect residuals or just sell it and retire with him in 13 years with his 2 pensions and our health insurance from the military for the rest of our lives.
And all that money you're going to make from selling your brokerage.
And selling the brokerage
Yeah.
and go see the world.
That's awesome.
So, it's an early retirement plan, but I think it's realistic.
I think it is too, and I think what I know about you, I'm not going to say no. I'm not going to say you can't do it. Tell me, you mentioned pad split. Let's talk about that for a second. It's kind of a new niche, like ADUs are a big deal, right?
Yeah.
You know, but then you probably have maybe you deal with those every now and then. But let's talk about what a pad split is, because the first thing you think about is, well, the homes are built on pads, and so you're splitting.
You're kind of splitting it up,
Okay, all right.
So take your standard 4-bedroom, 2-bath house, take your living room and divide it into 2 or 3 more bedrooms, take your garage, pipe cooling to it, heated and cooled, turn it into 2 more units, and you wind up with like an 8 to 12 bedroom house. And then they're renting out each room weekly, about $150 a week per room. So if you have a 10-bedroom house, you can do the math.
Yeah.
And the cap rates on it for investors are triple what they're getting on your typical long-term single-family investment.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I've got a buddy that goes to Hammock Beach and
Love Hammock
golfs.
Beach. And the golfing on the ocean course, yes.
Right, and there's homes there that have like 16 bedrooms or 12 or 14. Are these big mansions, or is
Those
it
are
almost
big
the same?
mansions.
That's different.
Those are
okay.
big mansions,
because
and-
they also have a bathroom for each bedroom.
Correct. And you're going to have a hard time doing pad split there because the HOA is going to have a problem.
They're gonna
with
say
it.
no.
So you're going to need to
Okay,
be
but-
outside of an HOA where the municipalities allow the pad split program. Jacksonville, Tampa, Orlando, Gainesville, Atlanta,
Wow.
Dallas, Houston, all big cities for pad splits.
Wow, so investors know about this. They love it. That's great. Good. Give me Your best take, what do you see the market doing in the next year? I know that's a hard question.
Oh,
Why would I
that's
do
such
that
a hard
to
question.
you?
It's gonna rely on interest rates,
Okay.
and it's gonna rely on the election. I think.
Yeah, I think you're right. There's
And
two things.
everyone's waiting on the election to see what's happening. And a lot of people are choosing not to do anything, not to move money around, not to buy or sell anything until they figure out what's going to happen
Let
with
it
the
all
election.
settle in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I'll
Okay.
tell you, this whole, we're waiting for the rates to drop. Oh my goodness. I keep telling people, you date the rate, you marry the house.
Yeah.
Buy the house
Always
now.
refi.
You can refinance. And
Yeah.
a lot of lenders now are offering products where when you close with them, you can pay like a flat $250 and they'll refinance within 5 years for $0.
Oh, sweet.
Because they
No
know
fees.
it's coming.
Yeah,
They
yeah.
know it's coming.
Yeah.
They're just trying to
Catch a
make sure
little
they
money
keep
up
that
front.
money.
Yeah, that's
And they keep the customer
And they keep
in
the
the long
client.
run. So date the rate, marry the property. Because if you wait and the rates drop, the same property, you're going to spend more money because you're going to be in multiple offer situations because
Yeah.
all those buyers are coming back.
Yeah. Tiea, this has been great. This is awesome. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap up with the same question I've asked every guest. So you're
Okay.
episode 397.
Wow.
And so the question is, what one piece of advice would you give a new agent just getting started in the business?
Don't say yes to everything. It's what I tell property managers as well. We get so money hungry in the beginning. You know, we're eating ramen noodles and PB&J and we're just out there trying to make money. But you will find that the wrong property or the wrong seller or the wrong buyer will waste more of your time and make way less. When you divide that paycheck up over the number of hours that you've worked,
Yeah.
you're going to make a lot less money when you could have taken that time and invested in finding the right buyer or the right listing.
Right.
So learn to say no when you should be saying no.
If someone wants to reach out to you, what's the best way for them to do that?
My email is tialevelsup@gmail.com. My cell phone is 615-533-2326.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Tiea, this has been fantastic. I knew it'd be cool because
Awesome.
you're no nonsense.
No nonsense.
And you have a lot of fun too, though. There's when to have fun, right? As opposed to when it's got to be serious and when you got to get your
Yeah.
work done. That's awesome. Thank you so much for being
Absolutely.
on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to the Real Estate Sessions. Please head over to ratethispodcast.com/RE sessions to leave a review or a rating and subscribe to the Real Estate Sessions podcast at your favorite podcast listening app.